All right. Good morning, everyone. Coming to you live from the Oregon Solar and Storage Industries Association. For those of you that we just changed our name to include the word storage into it. And we wanted to thank everybody for participating today. This is remote solar sales and really a conversation combining tried and proven techniques that we've been using for probably centuries in selling people and getting people's attention with modern software tools. And so we've collaborated with a bunch of professionals. Just to be clear, this is not a advertisement for products. We will be discussing some of Aurora's capability. We have a large part of Aurora's team here. It's really hard to get professionals that don't have an affiliation with an association. So I wanted to thank Aurora for the time that you've spent with us and with Greg. Some of you have trained with Greg before, Greg Welsh, but I really wanted to thank Aurora for donating the time and resources to have your staff available and really make this engaging conversation. So with us today, we have Greg Welsh, who's a sales trainer that's been with OSIA for many, many, many years. Even though we've changed an acronym, our name is still OSIA, O-S-S-I-A. We also have JT McCook, who has been at our conferences and represents Aurora, along with Cara Lopiano, who's the business development manager or director of business development. I don't know the specific title, but Cara's with Aurora as well. And so really, this is going to be an interactive session. We've got a plan. If you guys have questions, please put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and interrupt if it's pertinent. But we'll be fielding questions and things like that. So yeah, really the relevancy here is getting sparked. You know, we all have our phones now, and we all have our digital tools, and under current circumstances, a lot of us are even more remote and virtual. But really, you know, as we advance into all these new digital tools that are coming at us, and as life presents us with all these different challenges that make these digital tools more valuable to us, we don't want to lose the intimacy and the uniqueness of the in-person sales experience, which has been going on forever, ever. And when I was thinking about this, like the first era of remote sales isn't really now. It actually started with like mail and the telephone, right? And this is kind of an extension of it. Like, how do we use digital tools along with some of these old school proven techniques to really combine and make an effective sales process? And so, yeah, I just thought that was interesting that we've been doing remote sales with the telephone, with marketing, with advertising, but now we have all these different tools that we're going to discuss today, and still how to incorporate the old school method. You still have to have a closing line. You still have to ask the customer if they're ready to proceed or not. So all of these things still come into play. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Cara Lopiano with Aurora, and she's actually going to discuss some of the relevancy of these digital tools and how they are the next step for us. So Cara, why don't you begin?
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here, and this is the first time I've done this kind of webinar and conversation, so I'm really excited to be talking with everyone today. Thank you, Craig, for the promotion. I'm actually not the director, I'm just a business development manager, but I've been with Aurora for the last 4 years. And prior to being a business development manager, where my role is more focused on strategic partnerships and programs like that, I was an account executive. So I worked with a pretty wide range of Aurora's customers, you know, different sizes and business needs. And a lot of what I worked on with them was, how does this particular digital tool, this particular piece of software fit into the larger ecosystem of your organization? And how do we, you know, lower your operating costs? How do we drive revenue? And how do we, you know, increase sales velocity? And a lot of these play into, you know, the things that Greg and JT are going to talk about today. But over the last couple of years, what I've been really interested in was, how does, like I said, how does it fit into this larger ecosystem? And what are all of the tools that are needed to build this foundation that lets salespeople do what they do best, which is to, you know, get that close. So I actually do have a couple slides that I'm going to share today. Just give me 1 second to do that. And that, geez, that's what I want. Just if somebody could just give me a thumbs up, they can see my screen here. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
all good. All good.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. A lot of the data that I want to present today, and I do have a couple of slides just because I think it's hard to sometimes keep track of numbers, comes from a benchmark survey that we ran at the end of last year that really focused on, kind of where is the market right now in terms of technology and the technology that they're using. And for a little bit of background on digital transformation, I think that I'm personally kind of tired of people being like, oh, COVID this, COVID that, and that's what's brought us here. But because I think that a lot of these digital transformations have been in process for the last couple of years. So I think that what brings us to this point of digital transformation and really needing to think about our technological ecosystem are things like high soft costs as the market has gotten more competitive. We've also gotten a changing consumer. And we've got a consumer that's perhaps more amenable to being engaged digitally. And certainly I think that's a place where 2020 definitely, sped that process up. People are much more comfortable, on Zoom meetings like this. I think in a previous life, JT and I probably would have been up in Oregon doing this conversation, but here we are in this Zoom meeting. So I think that that's been a big driver of implementing this really robust digital ecosystem for your team to sell. So one of the things that we found when we did this research was that selling virtually and remotely is one of the biggest opportunities that people identified in 2020. The second is streamlining internal operations, and that's where software and digital transformation can be really effective. So just to kind of define what that means, it's using tools again that can help you drive revenue. And one of the big ones that that I always talk about that has been a really big point of conversation when I was working in sales and working with customers is the CRM. And how are you managing that relationship with the customer, and how are you using a suite of digital tools to help you do that better? I think that on the whole, digital transformation is not only the CRM, it has to include your marketing strategy. It has to include the design software, which is what JT is going to talk about. It's got to include, ERP, bill of materials. And then also what we're seeing now is this automation in the permitting space. And I think that that's what NREL's been working on. So there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of, sort of digital tools being brought on, but the CRM, I think, is the foundation here, because that's what, allows you to do the things that Greg is going to talk about, to have a really good follow-up, to get to the close, to really manage that relationship effectively. And I think what's important about digital strategies and digital technology is not only having these tools, but thinking about the way that they're connected in the larger, in the grand scheme of things. So what I worked on a lot with my customers with integration, and how do we take information out of something like Aurora and pull the array information and pull the production estimates and all of that onto your CRM, so that even if you don't get that close right during that first sales cycle, you have this really clean record of the engagement that you've had with a customer. You can leave little notes to yourself, about that person, the relationship that you had with them, maybe a little funny note. 70% of the people that we surveyed were using a CRM, so I'm sure many of that number is probably pretty true for this group as well. But it's the way that you're able to leverage a digital tool like this that makes it useful. It's not just having it and paying for that license. It's actually, implementing it into your larger sales strategy. And, what we found, again, in the survey that we did and some of the research that we've done, is that customers that are using a CRM and that are using it effectively and have integrated, all these digital technologies in a really effective way, tend to be less concerned about decrease in solar demand. Which again, now this survey was taken in the throes of 2020, so that was a big issue. I think that's maybe a little bit less so now. People were less concerned about customers delaying or canceling payments, again, because you've got this really clear record of your engagement with that customer. And then they tend to be more confident in their pipeline. So I think that those are outcomes that people really want to see, and having a well-positioned digital tool like a CRM, is really what makes that possible. And one of the things I've also seen and do want to mention is that in addition to having the CRM, when we think about that larger ecosystem, I think communication strategies using digital tools can be, a really clear way to reach customers faster. So one of the things that I thought was important was when you're reaching out to customers, having a really clear way of thinking about sending them the emails that you send, using GIFs, using engaging sort of back and forth kind of consultative sale. I think that that's been one of the things that our customers have had a lot of success with. So in terms of implementing your own digital strategy, finding what works for your sales team, I think that it's just using anything that you can to reach out to customers. So, I think I would conclude with, I get a lot of people asking, so I have a CRM, I've got a digital marketing platform like HubSpot, I've got an ERP, I've got all of these tools. How do I, decide what to do? How do I decide how to implement all of this? And what I always recommend that when you're going through this digital transformation process and you're bringing all of these processes onto the web, I encourage people to step back and think about, one, where are you copying and pasting information? Anytime you copy and paste and anytime you have to retype something in, that's a space for digital transformation. That's something that you can automate. That's something you can integrate. And I would really encourage people to think about, how can we make the tools talk to each other a little faster, streamline that process just a little bit. So I think that, I don't want to, again, steal too much of JT and Greg's thunder about how to use this to actually make a sale. But I do think that setting up a really good ecosystem, I think the CRM is among the most important, but also your marketing strategy, also your ERP, all of that, it really lays the foundation for helping salespeople do what they do best, which is sell. So I think with that, I'll let JT and Greg take over. Thinking about, the ecosystem and all of the technologies is something I am very passionate about. I don't know if any questions have come in. I haven't been watching the chat box, but I'm happy to speak more to, more to what I've seen, work, not work, and take any questions there. But Greg, I'll let you go ahead and take over.
Cool. Thanks, Kara. Craig, anything to kick me off here?
Yeah, I'll just chime in here. Thanks, Kara, for that. And yeah, it is really interesting, like, again, because part of this ecosystem, it just involves, it's just growing. We have to just add a little pause to this. And Greg sometimes doesn't love when I ask him this question, but what was selling like 1,000 years ago, Greg, or 50 years ago? No, but really give us a little bit of an idea. Trainer, mostly for consumer goods, things that we buy, that we purchase from others that are selling us. He's been a sales trainer for solar companies, for equipment manufacturers, for furniture companies, you name it. And so has a really good experience of like what the selling process is like. And so, yeah, just give us a little bit of a history and where we.
Cool. Thanks, Craig. Yeah. So when I was alive 1,000 years ago, Craig, you always get me there. So Craig asked me to wax poetic a little bit, everybody, about selling solar 10 years ago. And although 10 years ago really doesn't seem like that long ago in solar, if we equate a year in solar like a dog year. So that's like 70 years ago in our other walks of life. It seems like selling solar, even just 10 years ago, around 2010 when I got into it, is night and day from today. And really with remote selling, we're talking about saving time and being more efficient, being more productive, everything that Kara was talking about. But if I could sum up what selling solar was, certainly in California, New York, New Jersey, 10, 11 years ago, it was anything but time efficient. It was a very time consuming process, typically for most of the starting solar pioneers out there and the folks that were talking to the early adopters of solar. What was interesting about those days is lead generation was not the big thing that it is today. In other words, seems like a lot of leads coming in from a lot of very fervent believers in green technology, and the tax credits were new and people were reaching out. So there are plenty of leads, but the response time from our solar salespeople was very slow, and they almost like took this attitude like, I'll get to you when I get to you. So it was a very slow process from the initial lead capture to the initial solar proposal development, which was done without any kind of Google Earth type work back then. Just, kind of sometimes they would just go to the home first and take some photos, and then they go talk to the homeowner a little bit, and then they go back to the office and do up a proposal, probably spending hours on their design. JT, you'll talk about how different that is now, but way back in the day, if I'm the back in the day guy, Craig, that these solar advisors that I got a chance to not only work with and train, but actually a lot of the companies would hire me to coach their staffs up. So I would be in the office with them. I'd travel out. I spent 7 weeks in Vermont, riding in cars with solar sales folks, and I saw this all go into practice. And then they'd actually present the proposal, maybe get to the close, and then the customer would say, yeah, but what if we added more over here? Or what if we didn't put the solar panels there? And just to see the look, JT, I'll throw to you here in a minute, but the look on the solar sales rep's face when the customer decided to actually be a customer and want something that they wanted instead of what the salesperson was telling them to do. As soon as the customer wanted in on the process, it would jumble up the whole time-consuming proposal development and design. And then the whole thing kind of kick-started over again, back to the office, back to a redo, back to the home. So anyway, back then, that was kind of the norm. And really, it was really kind of the birthplace, I think, of a lot of the major, large national companies, because they saw an opportunity to really speed the process up. Meanwhile, some of the bigger, more sizable regional folks started getting into the technology side through different proposal tools, et cetera, maybe 5-6 years ago, and started picking up the pace and with the ability to start changing proposals on the spot and picking up the closing time. But if I were to equate then versus now, it would be like the difference between, think about it, everybody. When was the last time you went to a Blockbuster video versus when was the last time you just scrolled Netflix to see what you wanted? And it's almost like that. And so what really transpired over time is the technologies picked up the pace. The big players started with them, then it trickled down to the medium-sized players, and now it's accessible with folks like Aurora to everybody. And then the remote selling was even going on even 2 or 3 years ago. I knew a couple of players, one in San Diego, who had a specific remote salesperson who just did remote sales for customers who didn't want a solar rep to come to their home. So there was that even years ago, but certainly last year, everything changed, and many folks found that they had to be remote or they were out of business. And yet now, we're at that moment in time, JT, where there's this hybrid model kind of getting created, and are we going to pivot all the way back to the old, time-consuming strategies, or are we going to adopt new strategies to pick up the pace? So JT, I think you're the perfect guy to talk about this.
Definitely. And it's so funny, at the beginning of your talk, you mentioned that solar is like dog years, because so many of my friends and family ask me what the solar industry is like. And it's a lot like dog years, because within 1 year, there's so many new technologies on the market in terms of software, panels, inverters, that you learn so much in 1 year's time. And I haven't been, just to let everyone know, I haven't been doing this for 10 years, but I have been doing it for about 8 years. And I started out, before I joined Aurora, I was a designer at Sungevity, which maybe some of you have heard of. And even at that point, Sungevity was trying to do a full remote model, but it still required a lot of on-site visits, and it was incredibly time consuming. So if I put myself back in the shoes of a designer, I would be putting systems together for someone like Greg. So go on site, collect the information from the customer, then send it to me. And then I would do my best to try and piecemeal a design together. So from some of that information, I'd try to use Google Street View, Google Earth to determine shading, which just seems so archaic today. We were using even solar pathfinders, where you'd have to go on site with that fisheye glass and literally color in all the boxes where you saw the shading. Then it would come back to me, and I'd have to throw that into Solmetric Suneye or the Pathfinder tool. Total pain in the butt. And at the time, it seemed like that was the best technology on the market. And it just has completely changed. And the biggest issue, and Greg brought this up earlier, was the whole redesign process, because us as salespeople and designers, we want to tell the customers what they need, what we think is best for them. But every homeowner has an opinion. And there were times at Sungevity, we had one customer that requested 15 redesigns before he actually signed on the dotted line. And that cost us a lot of money in terms of soft costs. Every time we went on site, it was costing several $100s just to collect that information. So I have a couple slides today. I'm not really a slide heavy kind of person, but I just want to show you some perspective of how things have changed over the last 10 years. So on the left is a photo from 2011, something that I would have used back when I was a designer. And at the time, this was high quality imagery. I can see a ridge, an eave, a chimney, maybe some vents. And on the right-hand side, this is an example of near map imagery. So just look at the difference. It's almost like that old book that I'm sure many of us had to read in grade school. That was then and this is now. Technology has come so far because satellite imagery today, you can get within 7 centimeters of actually going on site. And that's where it really becomes full circle in terms of this new hybrid model. I think visiting customers face to face can be very valuable, so they can put a face to a name, you can develop a relationship. But a lot of the time, before you ever go on site to visit with someone, you can do a preliminary remote site survey. You can get the measurements on the rooftop. You can understand if you could fit, let's say, your minimum system size. At Sungevity, ours was about 2 kilowatts. And more importantly, you can do a shade study, which especially in the Pacific Northwest, the sites are so different in terms of how much sun exposure is going to hit the rooftop. And you want to make sure that before you ever invest the time and the money and the effort to close a deal, you just want to make sure it's worth your time to go on site and actually start pitching them. So there are so many great technologies out there, and it's really reduced the manual on-site processes and really helped increase the velocity from the beginning of the conversation to then the close. And overall, what I found is if you can increase velocity, have an accurate design, that just leads to more referrals from your customers. You're going to have a happy customer that refers everyone in the neighborhood. And that's kind of my spiel on how far things have come. And, you know, Greg, I'd love to kick it back to you in terms of tried and true sales techniques. Oh, you're on mute, Greg.
Sorry, did the old mute thing. We have to have at least one of those, right, everybody? Yep. Hopefully that's it. My apologies. Anyway, yeah, it was funny how you were talking about the sun eye, and I distinctly remember in Vermont, people using those telescopic poles on site to try to get the perfect shade reading. And again, just trying to use analogies between, you know, going to a mall to buy socks versus just, you know, ordering them from Amazon and having them delivered to your doorstep the next day. It's just like that. And yet with all these technologies, which are so valuable because at the end of the day, they save time. They help us be more productive. And as a consultant, someone who is an independent, I sell my time for a living. One of the things you realize when you're a consultant, when you focus on time, is that time is very finite. It's something you cannot make more of. Somewhere they can always make more inverters or more panels or more racking, but boy, oh boy, the time thing is very valuable and it's very finite. And what the technologies JT was talking about now give us so much more time to be more productive. But I just fear sometimes, and I've had some conversations, especially this last year with folks in solar, where they are 100% locked in home and they're doing, you know, 3, 4, 5 appointments a day, knocking them out, just going through proposal after proposal, almost in a robotic, anonymous sort of way with customers, that sometimes some core things get dropped. And so if we can find a way, and that's what this program is about, finding a way to combine the time saving, energy saving, frankly, if you think about all the car rides, all the carbons we're saving by not going back and forth to the office and all those sorts of things, all those time saving things that we're able to apply with the technology and yet still be connected with the customer. And if you're live with a customer and you're hybriding back in the home, which I know many folks are, We've taught people how to do that. But the concern is when you're in your home office, which I would argue that will continue. Even for those of you who may not want that to continue, I would argue it should continue, at least in a hybrid way, like JT was talking about, at least partially. It's always about the customer. If the customer wants you in the home, I think you should pivot that way. If they say no, let's talk on Zoom. I'm getting used to talking on Zoom. I've been talking on Zoom all year long. Sure, show me your solar proposal on Zoom. I just got off a Zoom call. Let's do another one, right? I think that's a great way to go, but we can't drop the real core sales strategies. And what are those? I always tell folks I coach with that, other than the lead generation part and the lead follow-up part, which we'll talk about towards the end of my little bit here, is there are three main phases of any sales process. And the first phase can easily be dropped on your way to a remote sales presentation, especially, with some cool technologies to show a customer. And that is, we still have to do the core things of getting to know our customers before we sell them anything. I used to tell solar advisors all the time when I'd ride out with them on an appointment, and I'd say, hey, a couple things. First, don't you dare start pitching solar to anybody until we have a good, comfortable read with the customers, until we kind of understand where they're coming from, what's important to them. We know what's important to us, but can we just take a moment to try to figure out what's important to them? What sort of good questions do you like to ask? Let's ask more than one question. Let's have some good conversations. Let's get a feel for them and hopefully help them understand that we're there for them. That yes, we're there to advise them on a solar purchase, but more importantly, we've got their back. And the only way you can really show that is if they feel like you care about them. So those kind of core initial sales skills are really important. Good questions, good conversations, open-ended questions, so that when you get to selling, when you get to actually presenting what it is you're recommending, whether you're showing a cool, slick slide on your screen, or an overhead view of their room, of their roof, or how the array is going to lay out, or how the production is going to change with the array on this side of the roof plane versus this side, or this panel versus that panel, all those cool things that we could show, we still have to take what we heard early in the presentation about what their needs are and make sure they understand that what we're trying to do is something that will help them, that we've got to be the interpreter from the solar technology, and maybe even the technology they're seeing on the screen in terms of how much the panels are producing and how much solar radiation is hitting this plane of the roof versus another. We have to be the person who says, so for you, what this means, the phrase for what this does for you. So putting the solar here versus here, what that'll do for you, using this inverter versus this inverter, here's what this would do for you. We have to be that kind of interpreter that helps them understand, especially in this technological age where they can just get lost in the technology and need to think about everything. What at the end of the day, our company, our proposal, our unique what we call USP, sales principles, which are the things that we bring to the table, our experience, our guys, our techniques, our warranties, our gear. What does that really do for them? And whether we're live with a customer or on Zoom, we still have to do that and do it with some punch. One of the people I've coached this year said, yeah, some of these remote solar presentations, sometimes I just feel like I'm a robot. And I could see how that could be really easy to fall into that trap. And so we've got to fight. We have to be the person in the conversation that's fighting the trap of being a one size fits all, or a robot, or do it the same way every time, 3 times a day, and that's my day. No, we should customize every presentation. It's really important to do that, to be persuasive. This shouldn't be a one size fits all sort of presentation. And then if we do that effectively, that just propels us to where we need to be, which was what Craig was talking about earlier. We still got to get to a place where we say, so based on everything we've talked about, would you like to move forward? We make it really easy. Does that sound good to you? Should we take the next step? Should we check our install schedule? We've got to get there. And those kinds of phrases are really important to use, whether certainly when you're live, but even when you're presenting remotely. And then there's all the what ifs. And Craig wanted me to talk about some of the what ifs. And while I've got time, one of the things that I've learned from remote selling in general and remote solar sales is that there are 3 or 4 areas that in which we can get tripped up in. And the first is actually in just getting the customer to arrive at the remote appointment. The no-show possibility goes up if you're a remote seller. In other words, if you're an in-the-home seller, you're going to show up for that appointment. Most of the times the customer is there, but you know you'll be there. And most of the time, you know, they'll be there because it's their house. Whereas it is easy for customers to no-show you on remote appointments. So your confirmation strategy, the way you confirm once you get the appointment, the way you confirm it, the way you message in between the time you confirm it and the actual appointment taking place, you know, the next day or 2 days from now or whatever it might be, the sorts of information you might advance in advance of the actual remote presentation. And JT, again, some of those visuals you're talking about, it would be cool to just send people. We're going to be talking about your roof. Here's a picture of your roof. We're going to be talking about, just so you know, tomorrow when we talk, we'll be talking about your home, right? And there's all kinds of things we can do to, I think, kind of make the customer feel like, wow, this sounds cool. I'm going to be there. I'm going to show up. So we've got to do that. We've got to really not only confirm the appointment, but really work to make sure they show up. And then once we start engaging with them, we've got to help folks engage with us, and that dramatically increases if we can get the customer to put the camera on. And I just want you to think, if you've done some remote sales presentations in this past year, have you run into the issue where you kind of technically get ghosted by the customer, where they're there for the appointment, but they won't turn their camera on? So you're literally talking to a blank screen. And so the personal part of connecting with someone is just very, very difficult. So a couple things. And Craig, I won't have you unmute, but you could just nod your head. I know this struck a nerve with you in terms of what can we do to help folks not just show up for the appointment, but start engaging with us. And certainly once cameras are on, the engagement process is much easier, because it feels like even though you're 3,000 miles away, Craig, or 2 neighborhoods away, or whatever it might be, 5 miles away, it's like you're sitting at the kitchen table together. And without the camera on, it's very difficult. So what can you do? Well, here's what you can do. Even when you start confirming your appointment, start putting the bug in their ear that you're going to want their camera on. That everything gets better if you can engage with them personally. And I think there's no magic phrase so much as there is just your effort to say, hey, we're going to want you to turn that camera on. I've talked to people who offered little incentives for turning cameras on. Hey, be sure to ask me about our little gift that we give anybody who turns the camera on during the whole appointment. Just little fun little things, playful things. I think, Craig, to your question, how do we get customers to turn their cameras on? We have to earn it. We have to earn it. We have to earn it with the way we confirm the appointment, with our reputation, with the way we prompt the fact that that's important. That speeds up the process. That allows us to engage. There are things that I just can't read via a text or even on an earpod, right? It really helps so we just got to ask for it and earn it. And I think sometimes I've talked to many reps this past year who said, I noticed that if I got really good at engaging with them, even if that initially their camera wasn't on, once they sensed that I was making it more about them than just the solar or the technology or the dollars or sale, once I really showed them that this is all about them. It's about their home. It's about their energy. It's about their savings. It's about their concerns. Sure, we've got technology to sell. It's changing all the time. It's so cool. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about talking about the technology. Meanwhile, we have all these technological tools that JT's been talking about that makes this really cool and easy to interact with. I could show you some stuff on screen, but if we don't make it about them, it's still going to be a fight getting the camera to turn on. And if the camera's not turned on, it's not the personal sort of relationship that we want. And so unfortunately what happens is it slows down the process. We get a lot of, only to think about it's the closing ability of the sale gets constricted. And so we have a lot of work to do on the back end. Meanwhile, the final point I'll make before I hand it back to JT on some other stuff, some fine-tooth combing stuff on technology and utilizing technology, is that the good news is if you commit a certain percentage of your business to remote selling, you're going to buy yourself all kinds of time. You are going to have time, and I would argue, time to do the one thing that most, in the old days, most solar salespeople would admit that they didn't do a lot of, which was following up with customers, following up with leads, following up with people that have been installed for the sake of good relationships, for the sake of good lead generation. I would train thousands of solar salespeople and get the same response every time when we got to the lead follow-up section. How would you rate yourself in terms of lead follow-up? How much time are you dedicating in the course of a week to lead follow-up? And then not just lead follow-up, but how about customer follow-up? Following up with folks that you have installed with. Are you in touch with those people? And you should be, because they are the source of revenue for the business. That is the sustainable part of this business, is happy customers. And yet if we're not finding time to follow up with leads and follow up with customers, which I could actually argue that it's tough when someone's in a city and they're driving back and forth in traffic because of redesigns, JT, right? That they don't have time to follow up and they don't have time to talk to their customers. Whereas if you're remote, you're in your home office, you are so much more productive. You have bought yourself so much more time to do the sorts of things you need to do. So that's one of the great things about remote selling, is the time you're gonna give yourself to do the things that probably you didn't do as effectively before, that you can be much better at going forward. And JT, just throwing it to you now, all these things throw right back on these technologies that you speak to.
Definitely. Yeah. And thank you for that, Greg. It's incredible how much more efficient you can be when you are essentially working from the home office, but you can still do the hybrid model, because there are just some great technologies out there that you can take advantage of. And from what I've found with a lot of the new technologies is that you can still do a fine-tooth comb research on the customer when you're designing, and it'll essentially reduce your design time to 10 to 15 minutes. And what I've heard from at least some of the customers I've talked to is that you can double, maybe triple the appointments that you can do per day. Now, there was a great question that came in from Matthew earlier, and my role today is to be as neutral as possible. But the question was, how do you get shade readings remotely? Well, this is my one Aurora pitch, is that we do have a feature called a bankable shade report. It's been validated by NREL, as well as every single rebate authority in the United States, including Oregon. And you can get those Solmetric Suneye readings, essentially, or the accuracy of those readings remotely with our shade report. So just wanted to answer your question, Matthew. And essentially, when you're designing remotely, you can get the easy information up front. So you can collect all of the utility information from the customer, confirm the address. I can't tell you how many times I'd get an address from a homeowner. I'd design the system, the consultant would meet with them, we'd sell the deal, and it turns out, whoops, we sold on the neighbor's house. Not only do we have to redesign the system, but now we have to resell to them on a new proposal, a new contract. And I just can't tell you how many times customers might not actually recognize their home. So you can confirm the home in Google Street View, the roof type, maybe have them take a photo of their service panel, just get all of that important information up front. And when it comes to solar softwares, it gives you the fundamentals to design and sell. And it all starts off with the basics. So how are you accurately going to determine how many modules can fit on the rooftop. At least for me as a former designer, that was always square one. How many panels will fit? And then essentially, how much is that actually going to produce relative to their electricity bill? I found I always wanted to make sure I wasn't oversizing or undersizing my systems, because unless the customer specifically said they didn't want to offset 100%, they wanted to go, let's say 10% more, 10% less. But that's just going to lead to an easier flow when it comes to the installation side. And then when the customer receives their first energy bill back from the utility, they'll really realize what you promised is what they're seeing. So once you've determined how much they produce, really the important part, at least from my experience, was most customers decide to go solar, maybe environmentally, but also for kind of the impact on their bank account, how much they're going to be saving. And then the final step with new technology out there, a lot of softwares also allow you to accurately determine how many batteries are necessary if they are interested in that battery conversation. So those are some of the fundamentals of what solar softwares allow you to do, and some other great features. Greg mentioned this earlier, but allowing the customer to have an interactive understanding of what their home is going to look like with solar. What is their energy future going to look like? If you're presenting with just a piece of paper and a bunch of numbers and graphs, it's not going to resonate with them, and they're not going to feel ownership over this system and get excited about it. So with a lot of tools, you can show a full layout. You can educate them on fire codes. I found when you educate a customer, you make them feel empowered as to what they're purchasing. That's going to really help them understand why they're buying and what they're buying. You can also use 3D modeling technologies. So you can then show them an actual view of what their home is going to look like when they drive home at the end of the day. So Greg mentioned earlier, going back to our first section, how the customers can be pretty opinionated of where they want panels to go. And you can actually take their advice of what they want and essentially show them, you know what, you asked for no modules on the roof, on the street facing roof. What I've done here is let me show you that perspective. Here's you driving home at the end of the day. You're not going to see any panels, but on the back side, you've got, let's say, a beautiful 10 kilowatt system. And then with other technologies, and this is specific to Aurora, and this really goes full circle with shading analysis, is there's a technology called LiDAR out there. You've probably seen it. It's on the new iPhone cameras. Self-driving cars use them. And what's great about this is you don't have to go on site to get on-site readings. This is what actually gives you the pitch and the height of the building remotely, but more importantly, it gives you the height of all of the surrounding trees. And with this technology, essentially when you're putting together your initial proposal to then, let's say, visit on site or do a Zoom meeting, the numbers that you're presenting in terms of production, shading, layout, those are all going to be as accurate as possible within just a few percentage points. And that's going to reduce your redesigns post-sale. That's going to really help the velocity from the initial conversation all the way to closing that deal. And these are just some of the few great technologies that are out there when it comes to solar software. So that is essentially kind of all the tech that I wanted to cover today. And essentially to wrap up this section, then we'll go to a Q&A. So Kara was able to show some important digital trends and tools that are taking place in the solar industry that can help your business. Greg and I have shared some tried and true sales techniques and how to use solar design software and how it can really improve your process. Now, again, I'm trying to be as neutral as possible, but I'm sure many of you are probably already using some form of solar design tool. But if you're not and you'd like to try Aurora, if you could please email me or call me directly before March 31st, I'm willing to set up a free 30-day account for you in Aurora to test out the software and really try the techniques that we've covered today. Now, this is really not a promo that we've ever done before. I've been at the company for 5 years now. We've never done this, but we wanted to offer it to the members of OCO today, whoever attended. And sorry, excuse me, this is just reading a little line here. You'll have to essentially be a first-time Aurora user. So if you're currently using Aurora or you've used it in the past, unfortunately, this offer is not available. So if you've never used Aurora, please contact me directly and we'll be able to set up a free 30-day trial. Now, I do want to specify this offer is only available if you contact me directly today. This is not something that you can take advantage of on the website. So just want to let you know, just contact me directly after today's session.
Terrific. Thanks so much. Does anybody have any questions?
I see Laura asked a question here. Sorry, just to jump in. Laura, if you wouldn't mind dropping your contact information, I would be able to follow up with you on some like energy consultants and sort of those kind of edge cases. JT and I, it's a slightly different conversation. We've seen it done. But if you want to just drop your contact information, we can follow up on that in a little bit more detail. Great, it's a great question.
Yeah, and I can make sure to connect you guys. Laura just dropped it in there. But I guess like, as I was listening, I have a quick question too. As I was listening, it came to mind, Greg and JT, how much we learn as a salesperson when we show up at somebody's house. We get to see the type of car they drive. If we get inside, we get to look at their kitchen. You know, when was it? All of this is information. If you're a salesperson, you're not thinking about all these things when you show up at somebody's house. Let me tell you something. We got to be thinking about these things when we show up at somebody's house. And you know, I was just thinking about what you said, Greg, leading up to this thing, you know, and what if somebody doesn't turn on their camera, trying to keep the conversation positive, right? And is there like a segue or a cool hook or something if you feel like you haven't gotten it off the ground? And I imagine it's the same thing. Like you may show up to somebody's house in person 5 or 10 years ago, and it hasn't gotten off the ground great right away. And to kind of transition, like, okay, so if we're not on camera, you know, and just still having like an upbeat attitude, and what was done so many years ago, if you couldn't get inside the person's house or you couldn't get to that next sales step, you know, to try and keep the hook there and continue on with the conversation. Is there something that you can offer there?
Yeah, I think, Craig, what I've seen others do is, again, not to take that defensively. You've got to honor their wishes. No, I'm not comfortable doing that. You say, hey, no problem. By the way, we understand that. But I still would love to see you personally if and when you feel comfortable. And hopefully I can earn that right even during this time that we have together right now. In other words, kind of projecting the customer forward. I still would like to see you and at least connect with you, you know, on a virtual basis as if we're at the same table together. But hopefully I'll earn that right here as we talk about your situation. And forgive me if I ask maybe in 10 or 15 minutes if you might be comfortable, because trust me, if you're worried about the crazy artwork in the background or the home office, don't worry about any of that. So we've seen it all, and we just love to interact with our customers any way we can, and hopefully to show you that we care about you and we want to hopefully work for you. But we'd love this to be more of a dialogue than a monologue as much as possible. So again, they just challenge themselves, Craig, I think is the answer. And they say, hopefully I'll earn that right for you to feel comfortable. And that's what it is. It's a comfort feeling for you to feel comfortable to engage with me, not just on an auditory way, but also visually.
Yeah, I think that's pretty key there. What you said, Greg, is kind of like back down a little bit in a humble nature and remind the customer that we are there to serve them, to talk about their home, talk about their needs in a way that's comfortable with them. And the thing that I always love, though, is the soft projection that you might ask them again in a little bit, right? You keep that soft, relentless thing up, because that's going to continue through the close, through the check writing, you know, through the whole entire process.
And it's a sum of all parts, Craig. Again, you know, I've talked to folks who I said, you know, be really thinking about what you're sending ahead of time and what your questions are. All these things will enhance the chances of them clicking camera on, right? If they see your bio, do you send them a bio? Do you send them a bio in advance when you confirm the appointment with your little picture there and your hometown and the high school you went to, not your resume, but really personal things about you? Are you quick to share to them? And if you're quick to share for them, they go, oh, wow, yeah, I'd like to talk to this person. My daughter went to that high school. And those kinds of things earn you the right to have that more personal connection with someone. And once you get that, I really believe you're off to the races with a virtual home appointment, because you're really missing nothing. Because when you've got someone on screen, and I say this after coming off the road from 27 years of travel and now being a remote coach and a remote sales trainer, right? When I'm coaching people on screen, we get done and they say, wow, that was just like you were sitting right here at the table with me. I go, yep. And yet here I am 1,500 miles away, and we just bought ourselves a lot of time because I didn't have to go to an airport and you didn't have to wait for you know what I mean? And so I think we just got to keep encouraging them to do that and say, so forgive me if I ask you again, because I just know it just makes everything such more personal, and I want to make this as personal as possible for you.
I love that, Greg. I love that personal feel there. Team Aurora, do you have anything that you can add about some of the popular CRMs that are currently being used in the solar industry? How to discuss sizing, and also folks in the industry. This is Newt, one of your colleagues down there in Eugene, Oregon. So if there's somebody that wants to write something in the chat, but it seems like Kara's hot to trot on this one.
Yes, yes, I've got, this was part of our survey. So that was part of, I didn't want to include it because I just was worried it was going to be like too many graphs and numbers, but we did ask when we did the benchmark survey at the end of last year, and what we saw was Salesforce, Zoho, HubSpot, and Pipedrive were the top 4. Salesforce far and away was the market leader for us, and I think anecdotally that's what I've seen as well. It's more expensive typically than a lot of the other CRMs. So in terms of finding the right fit, again, it's going to come down to what your needs are. Unfortunately, I wish I could give you a really clear answer, like this is the best for solar, but it's going to come down to, I think, sort of where your company's at right now. I would also encourage you, like, where do you guys want to be in 3 to 5 years? Again, with solar, solar dog years, you really can't think on like a 10-year. It's hard to think on a 10-year scale, but you're thinking about like what kind of integrations you need, what kind of customizations you need, because I think that does inform a lot of what you need. I know like something like HubSpot there's a little bit less customization that you can do with it from what I've seen, where Salesforce is sort of like you can basically build anything. So some of that is your own appetite for development, your own appetite for integration and things like that. But like I said, just to reiterate, Salesforce, Zoho, HubSpot, Pipedrive. We did also see JobNimbus, Insightly, and NetSuite on that survey, and I have heard of some others that are more solar specific. So again, unfortunately, there's a lot of options. So you just have to figure out what's most important.
Yeah, Newt, one thing that I'll add is that most of these CRM companies, even the smaller ones, have amazing tech support and sales support. And if you do, like, we type these HubSpot, Zoho, Salesforce, Pipedrive, I put that in the chat there so everybody can see. We've got Zendesk, and I'm sure folks will add some others in there. But OSEA right now is working through some CRM issues. It's a bit of a challenge for us, but I've noticed that their sales teams and the tech support are really trying to do the best that they can to make sure that they are helping us and letting us know what's appropriate and not appropriate. And I think we'll probably put together a CRM session to help folks out. Greg, we have a question here. Any strategies on identifying what to talk about with remote phone sales? I'm used to the traditional 45-minute to 2-hour in-person interaction where I can get to know them. We have ample time to cover what solar ownership looks like. Fast forward to the last year of you have a 20-minute phone call if you're lucky. I'm finding it hard to build rapport and read the customer, no body language, when I don't meet them in person. So this is from Jim Steiner.
Yeah, great question, Jim. And Jim, just so you know, you're not alone out there. I've heard this repeatedly. And again, my counsel to you is again, take a good long look at what you're advancing to the customer before the appointment. That's personal in nature. I started a lot of classes by telling solar advisors that before you even get to the door, in the old days when we knocked, we had to get to the kitchen table and knock on the door, you should advance them not only an appointment confirmation, but a bio about yourself, about what you look like, and what your high school is, and those kinds of things. In other words, you be the first one to just be the open book. And I tell this story all the time. I learned this long ago and this was back east, from a gentleman who, when we were talking about appointment confirmations, he said, I learned to do something because I found that when I went to the home, I was scaring customers. He was an ex special forces guy, got into solar for a reason, very, very heartfelt reason why he was in solar. And yet he was a tough looking guy that used to scare customers in those first 10 to 15 minutes of a presentation. And so what he started doing early on is he said, boy, I gotta get beyond this. I've got to advance information to the customer about who I am. And so he'd send him in advance a picture of himself. So, okay, that's a tough looking guy, but okay. And then who he was, his hometown, his high school, his hobbies. And then he did put a line in about his service in the military. But he said the day he started doing that, he found that people were much more open to start building rapport quicker with him. And I think we still got to do the same thing on the remote side, Craig. We've got to share with folks our personal story before we even have the remote appointment. And then yet when we start the remote appointment, Jim, when we do formal sales training, we have lists of good questions to ask customers, but they should be beyond just the solar space. In other words, beyond just, so what are your goals for going solar? It should be more, so tell me how long you've been thinking about this, and who do you know has gone solar, and what have they told you about it? What have you been hearing out there? And, being very strategic with the sorts of conversation starters that you have. The nice thing about a remote solar presentation, as JT could tell you, is you could prompt yourself. You could have all the little cheat sheets, behind your desktop, on the wall, right? You don't need to memorize anything. You can have everything laid out right in front of you to prompt good conversations. And again, if that camera goes on with good questions and good conversations, I actually argue you can build quick interaction, but the two or three things, advancing information, good questions, camera on, that's what speeds the process up. And without that, I could see how it could just be this robotic, grind it out, do another appointment, do another appointment, do another appointment, and that doesn't get us what we want. Craig, you're muted.
I love the idea of having a session, Greg, that you deliver at the next conference of how to build rapport and read the customer in the remote. I love this.
Absolutely. And there's other things, Craig. I mean, there's others who they'll always check out LinkedIn and Google to see, this person's, they're an artist, or they're a business owner, or they're an attorney, right? They do a little background information checking, right? To kind of speed the process. If they're referred, who referred them? I knew a certain solar advisor, when he'd go out on a referral appointment, he'd always call the referring customer to say, hey, so thanks for the referral for so-and-so. What can you tell me about them? Because I'm about to talk to them in 15 minutes. I'd love to get a heads up. So he'd use the referring customer to get a heads up on who that customer was, so that he could kind of artfully, move the discussion towards an area that the customer was prone to talk about, right? So
I love that, Greg, because if somebody called me and was like, oh man, your arborist is coming over, or if the arborist called me, or somebody was like, oh, I'm going over your buddy's house, right after I got off the phone with them, I'm the type of person that would be texting my buddy that's be like, oh, Jane's coming over to your place, man. You definitely got to use them. Like, they're the best. So I see how that can work. It's like, oh, they just called me, and because if you're the type of customer that refers, you likely somehow, there's those of us that want others to use our contractors. I'm that type of person. I'm always like, oh man, you got to use my floor plan.
Sure.
They're the best, and so if you're that type of customer, you're right. Like, calling that referring customer and some other things can help you get some of that info on the back end, for sure. Well, it is 12 o'clock. We can certainly keep this going. If there are some more questions, we'll definitely be following up afterwards. We've recorded this session, so we'll send this to you all. And I'll be following up with Kara's information, with Sunny's information, with JT's information, and with Greg's information. Naturally, you can always contact me to get in touch with these folks. And I wanted to make a plug for our next virtual session like this, which is going to be with Bill Holzer, who's on this call, and and Mark Farrell, who's been an OSEA member for many, many years, and we're going to be discussing referrals and the referral process, and really how to turbocharge that environment. So very apropos to the participants of this call as well. It's not going to be really a technical solar installation conversation as much as a business conversation, business development, referrals, and really moving along with this theme. Yeah, just give folks a last minute. JT, Kara, Sunny, if you want to address folks or mention.
First thing I'd like to say is I realized that during my presentation, my slide deck froze. So it sounds like what I was talking about, you weren't properly seeing. So I just want to apologize for that. If people would like to follow up, I can send over some visuals of what we discussed.
Why don't you send me all the slides, JT, and I'll make sure they end up in that email.
Okay.
As well, we can totally. And Kara, why don't you send me your slides as well? This is recorded and stuff, but folks can put it together. It'll be available forever.
Yeah. I've learned sometimes when you work remotely, it's just Murphy's Law. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
I think
so.
It was a pretty strong presentation.
Just roll with the punches. But the last thing I would like to just throw on the screen is just the contact details, which again, Craig will be sending out.
Yeah, there you have it. These professionals here. Greg, anything you wanted to add to our audience?
No, I would just challenge everybody. Sorry, I'm not muted. Oh, good, I'm not muted. So I just challenge everyone to combine the two, combine the technology, the time-saving technologies, the remote selling aspect of what we've all learned, whether we wanted to or not this past year, with still core principles of connecting with people, of being persuasive with our persuasive arguments, and getting to the decision process. Let's combine the two together and just be a much more productive business. I think that bodes well for everybody. So.
Beautiful. Kara, any final thoughts or?
No,
wrap this up?
No, just thank you, everybody. It was great to be here today, and let us know if you have any questions. We're always happy to help.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you.